All right, time for a new project. So I've got a new potable water pump here. And when we were on a recent camping trip, I noticed that when we were hooked up to basically city water, after a day, our potable water tank started to overflow. And I thought, gee, that's pretty odd. And so I did a little investigation, and it seems like about the only way that can happen is if there's a check valve in these pumps apparently, but if that's leaking and allowing water to go backward through the pump, then it can get into the holding tank and overflow like it did. We've also noticed that when we turn on the pump, it'll run for a little bit and pressurize the system, and then if we just leave it on every 30 seconds, every minute, something like that, it'll run again. And I've searched everywhere looking for leaks. I've left it on for quite a while and looked for drips under the coach. I can't find any leaks. But if it's allowing pressure to bleed off back through the pump, that could also explain why it's kicking on and running. And so I'm pretty sure that I've got a bad pump, and I don't have any records of when this pump was replaced last. And so the records I have from the previous owner went back 10 or 15 years. And so I think it's probably time to replace the pump. The one that I got, and I'll put a link to it in the description of the video, I just got it on Amazon. It's a Pentair SureFlow, and the model number is a 4008. This one does 3 gallons per minute with a pressure of 55 psi. This is the model number that I saw quite a few people with GMC Motorhomes talking about and saying that that's what they used and they liked it and it worked well. Looking at the pump that I have in there now, it's also a SureFlow, and it looks like it has a 2.8 gallon per minute pump rate. And so I think the 3 gallon may be a little bit of an improvement. We might see a little bit more flow from our faucets and things. The 55 psi is a bit higher, so our existing pump only has 40 psi pressure rating, and so when I put this in, it may create some leaks in the system because it's not used to seeing that 55 psi pressure. When I'm hooked up on city water, I have a pressure regulator that limits the pressure to 45 psi. So, and I don't have any problems other than this leaking back into the tank that we had last time. So I think it'll be okay, but that could be a little bit of something we'll have to play around with a little bit. So we take a look down here. I have another video where I installed this accumulator and kind of mounted things on this board in the back here. But you can see the existing pump. The new pump looks very similar. It's about the same size. I think it should fit right in the same spot. So I hope that will be the case. I'll have to do a little bit of fitting probably. But overall looks pretty good. One thing I'm going to do is this one is basically just hardwired in. I don't know why there's a fuse here necessarily versus up closer to the battery source, but I think I want to install some kind of a connector back here just to be able to easily disconnect this pump if I need to. But basically we'll just take out the old one and work on fitting up the new one and get it installed. I think this will be pretty straightforward, but you never know. We might end up with leaks or other misfit things that we have to work on. So we'll keep you posted on how it goes. All right, so I still need to clip the wires and get a connector so that I can wire in the new pump and have maybe a quick connector type of connection on it. But I've discovered that this is going to take a little more work than I was hoping for. I'm not sure how well you can tell with the angle, but this pump is quite a bit higher up off the surface of the floor, and so these don't line up, which means that on my old setup, the output from the pump went directly into the accumulator, and I used this little connector between them that made that nice straight shot. Well, that's not going to work because these are not lining up, so I'm going to have to do something to bring my accumulator up in line with this. I'll maybe need to do a little bit of rerouting of my hoses. So not a big deal, just not perfectly plug and play with my particular mounting. So do a bit of work here, and I'll show you how we progress. All right, well, I'm getting things fitted together here. I've got my pre-filter, we've got the new pump, got connection to the accumulator, and I'm getting ready to get things mounted. I did a wiring harness, so basically just wired in a 2-pin connector. I got this from a trailer connector just at the auto parts store. I wired the other end of that in down here where my wires were coming in anyway, and so now I've got a disconnect rather than everything being hardwired in. As I mentioned, if we look at the kind of side profile of this, the new pump is quite a bit further back from the accumulator, and so I needed to make a spacer that's about 1.25 inches thick. You can kind of see it down here where all of this is going to mount up, so that I would have everything in line and mounted. But what this will look like is basically the pump mounts back on the back wall, the accumulator mounts to that spacer that I made, and then I should be able to go ahead and connect all of my hoses and basically wrap this up. So looking pretty good, and as long as it doesn't leak when I'm done, I think this project is just about finished. All right, we've got it all installed. I had to shorten a little bit of this line coming in on the far side here because it wouldn't line up well, but everything's looking good. We've tested it and no leaks, which I'm pretty excited about. We use these plastic fittings that are part of the SureFlow system, and they connect up really nice. I ended up putting a little bit of Teflon tape on them, but I don't think it's needed because really the inside of this makes a tight fitting, kind of like a flare type fitting. But everything connected up nice. It works well. It's actually turned on and pressurized right now, and it hasn't kicked on since we pressurized the system. So the kicking on that we were getting, I think just helps confirm the backflow that was happening through the pump. It was bleeding off pressure. I tested it at the various faucets, and the extra little bit of gallons per minute and the little bit higher pressure seemed to make a big difference in the bathroom and in the kitchen sink. So kind of excited about that, to have a little bit better water pressure and just more flow. So that's pretty cool. The thing that is really amazing is how quiet this is compared to our old one. So the old one, you could hear the pump kick on pretty much anywhere in the coach. And even with it underneath the cushions and everything back here, it was pretty loud. In fact, even outside the coach, you could hear it kick on and you'd say, oh, need to go turn off the pump. So I'm gonna turn this on real quick. I'm just gonna run a little bit of water in the kitchen so you can hear it kick on, and it is really quiet. So I'll do that real quick. So I'm sure it picked up a little bit of that, the thumping of the pump and you know, the whir of the motor, but it is really quiet compared to the old one. Part of it, I'm sure, is just it's a newer system and, you know, maybe just a little quieter. The rubber mount on the back of this is really nice. The whole mounting system is rubber rather than our other one that was all plastic and then had little rubber bushings. So overall, very excited. I'll button things up, but I think this project is basically done.